November the 2nd, 2007. Police tape stretches across the entrance of a quiet stone cottage in Perugia, Italy. Inside, a 21-year-old student lies dead. A quiet hillside town in Italy, where a stone cottage at the edge of the old city once held two roommates, a friendship, and a case that would divide the world. This is HerCrime. Amanda Knox arrived in Perugia in September 2007, a 20-year-old exchange student from Seattle, full of hope for her year abroad, studying at the University of Perugia. She was bright, curious, and by every account completely ordinary. Nobody who knew her would have predicted what was coming. She moved into a small stone cottage on the edge of the old city, at 7 Via della Pergola, sharing the space with 3 other young women. It was the kind of student accommodation that thousands of exchange students move into every year across Europe. Unremarkable, ordinary, safe. One of her roommates was Meredith Kercher, a 21-year-old British student from Coulsdon, Surrey. Warm, disciplined, and by every account, genuinely happy in her new life. Meredith had a boyfriend back home, a close circle of friends in Perugia, and the kind of quiet contentment that comes from a life going exactly as planned. Meredith had come to Italy to study the language, immerse herself in the culture, and experience the kind of adventure most students only dream about. She was exactly where she wanted to be, doing exactly what she had planned, and she had no idea what was coming. Within weeks of arriving, Amanda met Raffaele Solicito, a quiet Italian engineering student, at a classical music concert. The two became inseparable almost overnight. They had known each other less than 2 weeks when everything changed. For a few short weeks, life in the cottage carried the ordinary rhythm of student life. Classes, new friends, and the small routines of settling into a foreign country. 2 young women building their year abroad, one unremarkable day at a time. It would not last. That rhythm ended on the morning of November the 2nd, 2007. Meredith failed to answer calls or open her locked bedroom door, and concern quickly turned to alarm. Knox and Solicito called the police. When officers arrived, they broke the door down. What they found inside that room would traumatize the investigators who saw it. Meredith Kercher was dead, partially covered, the victim of a violent sexual assault and stabbing inside her own bedroom. She was 21 years old. She had been in Italy for less than 2 months. The scene that investigators walked into that morning would later be criticized as one of the most poorly handled crime scenes in modern Italian legal history. Evidence was reportedly mishandled. The perimeter was not properly secured, and investigators moved through the apartment without the forensic discipline the case demanded. Those failures would haunt every stage of what followed. Lead prosecutor Giuliano Mignini advanced an early theory that the murder allegedly stemmed from a sex game gone wrong. A theory that was never supported by the physical evidence and was later widely condemned by legal observers as prejudicial and sensationalist. But it shaped the investigation from the very beginning. With no forensic link connecting Knox or Solicito directly to the crime scene, investigators turned their attention toward the couple, focusing not on evidence, but on behavior. How they acted in the days after the murder, how they appeared in public, whether their grief looked the way grief was supposed to look. Critics have since argued this focus stemmed less from evidence and more from cultural misreading. An Italian investigation struggling to interpret the reactions of a young American woman processing trauma in ways that did not fit their expectations of how an innocent person should behave. What followed was contentious from the very beginning. Knox was brought in and questioned over 4 days and approximately 53 hours without a lawyer consistently present. She has alleged the questioning was aggressive and that at one point she was struck by an officer, a claim Italian authorities have disputed and which the European Court of Human Rights declined to confirm. What the court did confirm was that Italy had violated her right to legal assistance and to an adequate interpreter during questioning. Exhausted, disoriented, and without reliable legal support, Knox eventually signed a statement implicating herself and accusing her boss, Patrick Lumumba, of being present at the cottage on the night of the murder. Lumumba was arrested immediately. He spent approximately 10 days in prison before his alibi was confirmed. Knox retracted the statement, almost immediately saying it had been coerced. Lumumba sued her for defamation and won. That slander conviction, as of January 2025, remains her only outstanding legal matter. By then, the damage to her public image was already done. Global media outlets seized on the case with extraordinary speed. Tabloids nicknamed her Foxy Knoxy, recasting a 20-year-old college student as a manipulative, sexually charged killer, long before any trial had begun. Her MySpace nickname, her appearance, her relationships, all of it was weaponized against her in the court of public opinion before a single piece of evidence had been tested in a court of law. Her defense team argued this portrayal had far more to do with selling headlines than with any actual evidence in the case. But the damage was done. By the time the trial began, the world had already made up its mind about who Amanda Knox was. But as the investigation deepened, the physical evidence told an entirely different story than the one being written in the press. Bloody fingerprints, footprints, and DNA recovered from the scene were matched to a local man named Rudy Guede, a drifter with a known criminal record who Kercher had met just weeks before her death. Guede fled to Germany shortly after the murder but was tracked down, extradited and convicted in a separate fast-track trial in October 2008. He was originally sentenced to 30 years, later reduced on appeal to 16 years. He served approximately 13 years and was released in 2021. The only person whose DNA definitively placed him at the scene of Meredith Kercher's murder is already free. Despite this, prosecutors continued to insist that Knox and Solicito had also been involved. The prosecution's case rested on two pieces of physical evidence. A kitchen knife found at Solicito's apartment they claimed matched a wound on Kercher's neck, and the clasp from Kercher's bra found at the crime scene with Solicito's DNA allegedly on it. Both pieces of evidence would later be heavily disputed by independent forensic experts, who concluded the samples had likely been contaminated during collection. In December 2009, Knox and Solicito were found guilty of murder. Knox was sentenced to 26 years. Solicito received 25 years. The courtroom erupted. Some spectators cheered. Knox wept. She was taken back to Kapan prison, where she had already spent over 2 years awaiting trial. She maintained her innocence from the moment of her arrest. She never stopped saying so. Knox spent nearly 4 years in an Italian prison. She learned Italian fluently. She wrote. She appealed. Independent forensic experts were finally brought in to re-examine the DNA evidence. What they found was significant. The alleged murder weapon showed no confirmed trace of blood, and the DNA samples had likely been contaminated during collection. The evidence that had convicted her was ruled unreliable. In October 2011, an appeals court overturned both convictions. Knox was freed and flew home to Seattle. For a brief moment, it appeared the nightmare was finally over. She had spent 4 years of her life in an Italian prison for a crime the evidence could not reliably place her at. She was 24 years old. She went home and tried to rebuild. But Italy's Supreme Court ordered a retrial, citing what it described as errors in the appeals process. In January 2014, Knox and Solicito were convicted again. Knox in absentia from Seattle, where she said she would never return to Italy willingly. Her sentence was increased to 28 years and 6 months. The nightmare that she thought had ended had started again. Knox appealed one final time. In March 2015, Italy's highest court, the Supreme Court of Cassation, definitively and permanently cleared both Knox and Solicito of all murder charges, citing what it called glaring errors in the prosecution's case, and a rush to judgment, driven in part by the high-profile nature of the proceedings. After nearly 8 years, the murder case was finally closed, but not entirely. The slander conviction for the written statement Knox gave police in 2007, accusing Patrick Lumumba, continued to wind through the courts. Knox appealed to the European Court of Human Rights, which in 2019 ruled that Italy had violated her rights, ordering Italy to pay her €18,400 in damages. Despite this, the Italian courts reconvicted her of slander in June 2024. In January 2025, Italy's Court of Cassation denied her final appeal. The slander conviction is now final. Amanda Knox has since become a writer and advocate for the wrongfully convicted, using her own case to speak on the fragility of justice under public pressure. But at the center of this story remains a young woman whose life was cut short far too soon, and whose own story was too often overshadowed by the media storm surrounding it. Meredith Kercher, she was 21 years old. The question of what happened that night has never been fully resolved.